Welcome to the deep dive.
Oh.
Okay, let's unpack this. We often think of big fields of study, as these solid, unchanging things.
Like monuments, right, fixed.
Exactly. But when you actually look closely, especially into the history, it's rarely like that.
Not a monolith at all.
No, it's much more dynamic, often, full of debate, evolving ideas.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're diving into today. We're looking at a really fascinating chapter from Freud and Beyond, a history of modern psychoanalytic thought by Mitchell and Black.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission really is to explore that lively, sometimes bumpy terrain of psychoanalytic theory itself.
Yeah, and what jumps out right away in this chapter is how it just dismantles that idea of psychoanalysis being one single thing.
Right.
Instead, they call it a university unto itself.
I like that framing.
It really fits. You've got all these different theories, sometimes clashing, but all living under the same roof, so to speak. And these internal debates, they're not just, academic arguments. They really mirror bigger intellectual shifts in Western thought about the mind.
How we understand ourselves.
Exactly. How the mind works, how it develops.
That's a great point. And before we get into those divisions, it's probably worth saying that analysts do generally agree on some basics.
Oh, definitely. Core ideas.
Like the mind being complex, the power of unconscious stuff, thoughts, feelings outside our awareness.
That influence us anyway.
And the value of really digging into our subjective experience.
Absolutely. That deep inquiry is key.
But yeah, beyond that baseline, well, that's where it gets interesting.
And complicated.
Wonderfully, sometimes dramatically so. So we're going to look at some of the huge questions that have, both linked and split different psychoanalytic schools.
Creating these, what the authors call continually deepening dialectics. Contrasting ideas pushing against each other.
Okay, so where do we start? The chapter flags one issue as, maybe the most divisive.
The single issue that has given rise to the most impassioned, strident, and sharply contrasting beliefs.
Yeah, that one.
And it really taps into that fundamental question. Nature versus nurture.
Always comes back to that, doesn't it?
It seems so. Specifically here, what's the root cause of psychopathology? Mental suffering, disorder.
Where does it come from?
Exactly. And Freud, initially, he leaned towards nurture.
He did, yeah, his early seduction theory. This is before 1897.
Right. So he thought it was mainly caused by real traumatic experiences.
Specifically, precocious sexual seduction. Actual events.
And the idea was these traumas created feelings, thoughts
that
were just too much.
Too overwhelming to integrate into your sense of self. They got split off, basically.
Leading to neurosis.
Leading directly to neurosis, yes. That was the initial model. Nurture-driven.
But then came 1897.
Ah, yes. The big shift. A huge pivot, really, for Freud and for psychoanalysis.
He introduced the infantile sexuality theory.
Which swung the pendulum hard the other way. Towards nature. So psychopathology wasn't just about external trauma anymore.
No. In this new view, it stemmed from the warping effect of childhood fantasy.
Fantasy.
Yes, and these universal, inherent, internal sexual impulses and conflicts. Like the Oedipus complex, that's the classic example.
The desire for one parent, rivalry with the other.
Exactly, that internal drama. So actual trauma, real experiences, they still mattered.
But their role changed.
Right. They weren't the primary cause anymore. They became factors that sort of aggravated an underlying internal problem.
A problem that was already there.
Predating the experience, yeah. The quote sums it up. Psychopathology is not an intrusion from the outside, but distortion of what is inside.
Wow. That became the standard Freudian view, then.
That became the definitive Freudian position, emphasizing those internal conflicts.
It's amazing how these ideas swing back and forth, isn't it?
It really is, because after Freud leaned into nature, later theorists, the relational ones,
they brought nurture back.
They brought it back, but in a much more nuanced way. They redefined trauma. It wasn't just about a single big bad event anymore.
Like the seduction idea.
Right. Instead, it became about the chronic failure of parents to meet a child's psychological needs.
Yeah.
Consistently. Over time.
Okay, that sounds different. And Winnicott is key here.
D.W. Winnicott, yeah.
Yeah.
British pediatrician, psychoanalyst. His concept of impingement is crucial.
Impingement? What did he mean by that?
Well, he argued infants need this protective holding environment.
From the good enough mother? Right, not perfect, but...
reliable enough. Someone who buffers the infant, protects their quiet state of just, going on being.
Okay.
Impingement happens when that protection fails. Maybe too much external stimulation gets through, Or the mother intrudes with her own needs.
Or the baby's needs just build up too much.
Exactly. Those are impingements. So for Winnicott, trauma wasn't just something bad happening to the child.
It was also something good not happening.
Precisely. The failure to sustain something positive and necessary for healthy development.
That's a subtle but profound shift.
It is. And MMR Khan built on this, calling it cumulative trauma.
Cumulative, like it adds up over time.
Exactly. It echoes Freud's original idea about seduction in a way, but it's much broader, more about the ongoing emotional environment.
And this idea of chronic failure, of developmental needs not being met, that resonated elsewhere too.
Oh, absolutely. Across lots of post-classical theories. Object relations, focusing on internalized relationships.
Right.
Ego psychology with its focus on maternal care for building a stable self. And self-psychology, highlighting empathic failures, parents just not getting the child's needs.
So in these views, the trauma isn't just a specific act, it's more about the parent's own issues.
Yeah, parental character pathology. Their own difficulties, anxieties, blind spots that just get in the way of providing that consistent emotional support.
And that forces the child to focus on just surviving rather than
on becoming a person, as the authors put it. It derails development.
Okay, so we've had nature, then nurture, then this more subtle nurture. What about now? Where have things landed?
Well, the contemporary synthesis, as the book calls it, is really about moving beyond that stark either.
Makes sense. Outside psychoanalysis, we talk about nature and nurture interacting all the time.
Exactly. And that's happening inside psychoanalysis, too.
Yeah.
The polarity is definitely softened.
So how does that look?
Well, take contemporary drive theorists like Lowald or Kernberg. They're building on Freud's big picture framework, his metapsychology.
Right.
But they see our basic drives as being shaped by interaction with the world. Caregiving, frustrations, gratifications, they all mold the drives.
So nurture influences nature right from the start.
Nurture is seen as built into nature from the beginning, yeah.
Yeah.
That's quite different from Freud's idea of the id being totally separate from the external world.
And on the other side, the relational theorists.
They're incorporating internal factors more explicitly now. Maybe not drives in the Freudian sense, but definitely things like temperament.
Like a child's innate excitability or sensitivity.
Exactly. People like Daniel Stern, Joseph Lichtenberg, they talk about development as these complex interactions where kids and caregivers either sort of fit or don't fit.
So a parenting style might work for one kid, but not another.
Right. Because of their inherent differences. So here, nature is built into nurture from the beginning.
So it's not either anymore. It's this constant interplay.
A dynamic interaction. Nature and nurture constantly shaping each other. It forces us to look at the whole complex picture.
And this complexity really comes into focus with really difficult topics like childhood sexual abuse.
It does. That debate really highlights the different theoretical leanings.
How so?
Well, take Leonard Schengold, contemporary Freudian. He acknowledges actual abuse is damaging, obviously.
Of course.
But he sees the trauma as mainly amplifying stuff he believes is already there internally.
Like what?
Pre-existing impulses, sadomasochistic leanings, Oedipal conflicts, primal scene fantasies, things he thinks arise naturally in kids. So for him, the cure involves releasing the child's own repressed fantasies and wishes. Even the controversial idea that maybe the child, on some level, wanted this or secretly enjoyed this.
Wow, that's challenging.
It is. And his starting point often assumes incest is largely imagined, so the patient has to prove it happened. The risk, clearly, is invalidating real experience by focusing only on fantasy.
And the relational view.
People like Jody Messier-Davies and Mary Gale Frawley, very different emphasis. They focus squarely on the actuality of the experience.
On what really happened.
Yes, and the patients struggle to integrate experiences that have been dissociated, split off.
Yeah.
And dealing with conflicting feelings.
Like loving a parent who also abused you.
Exactly, that terrible conflict. The father whom I loved was also the father who cruelly abused and exploited me.
That makes sense.
They do acknowledge that the child actively elaborates on the experience through fantasy, maybe wishing for repair or identifying with the abuser.
But their starting point is different.
Their starting point is generally a readiness to believe the patient's account, unless there's strong reason not to.
And the danger there.
Well, potentially invalidating the patient by not exploring the fantasy elements enough or rushing to declare abuse happened, which can cut short the patient's own process of figuring out what was real and what was fantasy.
It's incredibly complex territory. There are risks either way.
Profoundly complex. It really shows how difficult it is to balance honoring experience with exploring the internal world.
Okay, so that's the trauma versus fantasy debate, or maybe trauma and fantasy now. What's the next big area of contention?
The next big one shifts from causes to obstacles. Why do people get stuck?
Stuck in symptoms or repeating painful relationship patterns?
Exactly. What stops them from healing or growing?
And the traditional classical Freudian answer is
Conflict. Internal conflict.
mental warfare, as the chapter puts it.
Yeah, the psyche fighting itself. Conflicts between drives like sexual or aggressive urges and the forces trying to keep them down, keep them repressed.
So neurosis is seen as a battleground.
Pretty much.
The chapter uses Paul's case as an example.
Right, Paul. Young guy, lacking confidence, feels like a fraud.
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Sexual inadequacy issues, fantasies about stronger men.
So from a conflict perspective, what's going on with him?
The hypothesis would be he's inhibited by guilt and anxiety. He's afraid of his own power, his own ambition.
An Oedipal story again?
Often, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe he unconsciously felt he wanted his mother when his father dies, and now he's terrified of his own success, his own aggression or sexuality.
And the fantasies about stronger men.
Could be seen as negative Oedipal longings, wanting love from a powerful father figure, fearing losing it if he becomes powerful himself.
So how do you help him in this model?
Therapy aims to lift the repression, bring those unconscious conflicts into the light, gain insight.
And insight sets him free.
That's the idea. Understanding the conflict resolves it, freeing him up.
Okay, that's the conflict model. What's the alternative?
The alternative, coming more from post-classical theories, focuses on arrested development.
Arrested development, meaning something didn't grow properly.
Exactly. From this view, Paul's core problem isn't internal warfare. It's that something crucial was missing in his early development.
Like what? What was absent?
Maybe necessary parental provisions. Perhaps he lacked a father figure to look up to, someone to give him the blessing to be a man.
So the problem isn't what is there, but what isn't.
Fundamentally, yes. His macho fantasies, from this perspective, aren't just about conflict.
They represent the missing father.
They could be symbolic stand-ins for that longed-for figure, yeah. His paralysis isn't just fear, it's a result of insufficient conditions for growth. Something needed wasn't provided.
So he's stuck because something is still missing.
Right. And the help looks different, too.
How so? Less about insight into conflict.
Insight is still valuable, but the analysis aims to provide experiences analogous to those missing parental provisions.
Analogous, like similar to...
Yeah, not literally reparenting him, but creating conditions in the therapy where that stalled development can get kick-started again.
Facilitating growth that got stuck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And allowing him to mourn what he missed out on. Different theories frame it slightly differently. Ego psychology on identifications, object relations, on relating freely, self-psychology on attunement. But the core idea is environmental insufficiency thwarting development.
Okay, conflict versus arrested development. But again, is it really either?
Well, that's the thing. Contemporary thinking sees them as much more intertwined.
How do they interact?
Conflict can cause arrested development. Think about it. If internal conflicts lead to sexual inhibitions,
Right.
that might make someone avoid relationships, missing out on key developmental experiences.
Okay, yeah. And the other way around.
Arrested development can be maintained by conflict.
How does that work with Paul?
Well, his longing for that perfect, feeling like an imposter actually protects that fantasy. Because if he actually claimed his own power, became his own man.
He'd have to give up the hope for the magical father, accept reality.
Exactly. He'd have to let go of that fantasy. So the conflict, self-reproach versus ambition, preserves the arrested state, longing for the missing provision.
Wow. So they're continually interactive dynamics.
Precisely. Not separate issues, but deeply linked. It makes the whole picture much richer, I think. Healing involves both insight and fostering growth.
It also changes how we think about defenses, right?
Definitely. The classical conflict model emphasizes repression.
Pushing things down out of awareness, like a horizontal split.
Yeah, conscious versus unconscious, like a basement. But the arrested development model often talks more about dissociation.
Dissociation, splitting things off.
Yes, but more like vertical splits.
Mm-hmm.
Different parts of the self aren't integrated, or potentials remain undeveloped, often linked to overwhelming or traumatic interactions.
So not buried deep down, but sort of separated side by side.
That's one way to think about it. Jody Davies has that great metaphor.
The kaleidoscope.
Yeah. The unconscious isn't an onion to peel or an archaeological site to dig up.
But a kaleidoscope.
Complex, dynamic, always rearranging its pieces into new patterns, not just a fixed past waiting to be uncovered.
That's a powerful image, constant shifting.
It really captures that sense of fluidity and complexity.
Okay, so these shifts in understanding trauma, conflict, development, they must have big implications for how psychoanalysis views gender and sexuality.
Oh, absolutely. This is where, perhaps most dramatically, you see the internal theoretical debates reflecting larger cultural changes.
Freud's views reflecting his time.
Very much so. Darwinism, Victorian society.
And post-Freudian views reflecting ours.
Shaped by feminism, gay rights, postmodernism. Definitely.
So let's recap Freud's view quickly. Sexuality was
a natural force, but primitive, potentially disruptive to civilization.
And gender.
Pretty much biologically determined. Anatomy is destiny.
Boys value the penis, fear castration.
Which means becoming feminized, losing power.
Girls feel castrated, inferior, want penis substitutes, like babies.
That was the basic framework, yes.
But Melanie Klein took these ideas in a different direction.
Significantly different. Sexuality was still a powerful force for her. But it wasn't just about physical tension.
It emerged within relationships.
Within the child's struggle to integrate love and hate, good and bad feelings, towards their internal and external objects, the people they relate to.
So less physical, more symbolic.
Very much so. The body was symbolic. Sexuality was a way to express positive feelings, what she called the reparative power of one's goodness.
Making amends after destructive feeling.
Exactly. And reproduction wasn't just about having a penis or compensating for not having one.
It was proof something good could survive inside.
Survive internally despite all the destructive feelings. It's a very different feel. The huge shift is, for Freud, personality forms around sex. For Klein and later relational thinkers, personality forms around relationships, and sex gets its meaning from that context.
That's a fundamental reorientation. And since then, Freud's specific ideas about gender development have faced a lot of challenges.
A huge amount.
Yeah.
Especially the idea that masculinity is the default, the baseline standard.
Like the early cultural critics, Horny Thompson.
Right. The classical culturalists back in the 30s and 40s, they argued gender is mainly a cultural creation.
Thompson saw penis envy as symbolic.
Yeah, not literal anatomical envy, but demanding equality with men in a symbolic way. She also highlighted adolescence for girls, due to social pressures, long before Gilligan did.
Then you have theorists revisiting biology, but differently, neo-biological models.
Right, like Chesquest-Mergel suggesting Freud's focus on the penis was actually a defense against fear of the powerful, preedible mother.
Fear of engulfment.
Exactly. The penis allows escape. Castration anxiety becomes dread of engulfment.
And Erickson, different anatomy, different orientation.
Yeah, boys oriented to external space, girls to internal space, but seeing that internal space as a positive, fertile presence, not a lack.
And Irene Fast talked about mutual envy.
Penis envy and childbearing envy. Both sexes envy the other's perceived advantages.
Then there's developmental essentialism. Gilligan, Miller, Jordan.
They focus less on origins and more on potentially distinct sensibilities.
Like Gilligan rescuing female values.
Right, arguing that an ethics of care isn't just underdeveloped male thinking, but a different, valid moral voice. Miller and Jordan suggested women might be inherently more attuned to others' emotions.
More resonance.
Emotional physical resonance, yeah.
And alongside that, the developmental constructivists. Chodorow, Benjamin.
They bring it back to social structures. Gender differences aren't essential. They're artifacts of how we raise children, especially the inequalities there.
Chodorow noted girls identify more easily with female caregivers.
But argued that's cultural, not essential.
Okay.
And Benjamin pushes for integrating stereotypical male assertion and female connection, finding a creative tension.
So it's this constant back and forth, biology versus culture, essentialism versus constructionism.
A perpetual dialectic, as the book calls it. And postmodernism even questions if nature itself isn't a social construct.
It really makes you think about how deep these cultural assumptions run.
Absolutely. Even what we consider natural is shaped by our viewpoint.
And this definitely plays out in the debates around sexual orientation.
Hugely controversial, yes. And interesting because Freud himself...
He thought it was mostly constitutional, inherent.
Largely, yes. Not primarily a defense mechanism. And crucially, he felt changing it wasn't a valid goal for analysis.
But that's not what happened in American psychoanalysis later on.
Not in the mainstream, no. In the 50s and 60s, they largely ignored Freud on this.
And took a different view.
A different kind of biological determinism, actually. They claimed everyone was naturally heterosexual, making homosexuality pathological.
A phobic retreat from castration fears.
Right. And tragically, this led to directive approaches, conversion therapy attempts.
Directly contradicting Freud and the ideal of non-directiveness.
A really unfortunate chapter in analytic history.
But things have changed since then.
Thankfully, yes. Since the mid-'80s, that directive approach is widely discredited. You still have some neobiological accounts popping up interest in brain science. People like Richard Isay arguing for a constitutional basis, or some feminists talking about compulsory heterosexuality.
But the dominant view now
is that sexual orientation, like gender, is seen as a complex psychological and social construction.
Not just biology.
Not a simple result of anatomy or brain wiring. This disconnects sexuality from just reproduction. It depathologizes homosexuality.
And it means you have to explain heterosexuality too, right? Not just assume it's the default.
Exactly. It demands an explanation for all orientations. It reflects a much broader cultural shift.
Okay, so we've covered major debates about the mind's content and development. The last big controversy tackled in the chapter is about psychoanalysis itself.
Yes. About the very nature of psychoanalytic knowledge. What kind of knowledge is it?
This feels very meta.
It is. It reflects those bigger postmodern questions about thinking and knowing. Even science isn't seen the same way it was in Freud's time.
So what was Freud's view? How did he see psychoanalysis?
As empirical science.
Really?
Firmly.
Producing facts, testable knowledge.
Yes. He saw the analytic session as a kind of laboratory.
And the analyst.
An objective investigator, exploring the mind.
And how did he think interpretations were proven?
A correct interpretation should produce results. Lift repressions, unlock fresh unconscious material, new associations, dreams, insights that confirm it.
Tangible evidence within the session.
Yes, and he even hoped for external confirmation eventually, like finding physiological links.
But that empirical view has been challenged.
Significantly. For one, philosophy of science has shown that empirical validation is trickier than Freud might have thought.
And specifically within analysis.
The philosopher Adolf Grünbaum raised the big problem of suggestion.
The analyst influencing the patient.
Exactly. The analyst isn't a purely objective observer. They're part of the interaction. That makes the simple laboratory analogy tough to maintain.
So modern empiricists look for other kinds of data.
Often, yes. Beyond just what happens between analyst and patient.
What's the main alternative to seeing psychoanalysis as an empirical science?
Hermeneutics. Interpretive science.
Like studying texts.
Right.
Or history.
History is a great analogy the chapter uses. Old school historians aimed for the objective truth, what actually happened.
Right.
But now, many see history writing as an active dialogue between past and present. The historian selects, interprets, constructs a meaningful narrative based on their current perspective.
So it's not just facts, it's a persuasive story that makes sense now.
Precisely. And that's applied to psychoanalysis.
How?
The analyst faces this overwhelming amount of data, everything the patient says, does, their whole life history.
An infinite array.
Exactly. They have to be incredibly selective to build a useful understanding.
So it's an active construction.
That's the argument. Donald Spence talked about narrative truth versus historical truth.
Meaning the story created in analysis might not be literal history.
Right. He argued patient associations are often constructed, shaped by the analyst's theories. He urged skepticism about literal truth claims.
And Roy Schaefer.
He took it further, saying psychoanalytic understandings are narrative storylines. Each theory offers different plots, heroes, villains, journeys.
But not just making things up.
No, not random fiction. Good interpretations, like good history, have to make sense of the data, be coherent, persuasive, and helpful for growth. They're tested by clinical communities over time, not just by pure logic or empirical proof.
And others emphasize the interaction itself.
Yes, people like Erwin Hoffman, Donald Stern. They stress that the analyst's insights emerge from that intense back and forth of transference and countertransference. Theory often comes after the fact, explaining what happened in the interaction.
So psychoanalysis is kind of a method in search of a rationale.
That's a phrase used, yeah. Some analysts still strive for an updated empirical grounding. Others fully embrace the hermeneutic interpretive view.
Where does that leave us?
Well, Charles Spizano offers another angle, drawing on the philosopher Richard Rorty.
Which is?
That psychoanalysis has generated genuinely useful ways of understanding human experience, and these stand on their own merits.
Regardless of whether it's science in the strict sense.
Right. Empirical findings can feed into it, provide ideas, but they aren't the final judge of whether a psychoanalytic idea is valuable or insightful. It values the meaning-making capacity itself.
Okay, let's try to unpack this one last time. What are the big takeaways here?
Well, first, psychoanalysis isn't one thing. It's diverse, it's contentious, it's always evolving. Definitely not a monolith.
Right, a university unto itself.
Exactly. And these core debates we looked at,
Trauma versus fantasy,
conflict versus arrested development,
gender and sexuality.
and is it science or interpretation?
They show how our understanding of the mind is constantly being renegotiated.
Absolutely. And it's not always about finding the single right answer. These different perspectives, these different centers of gravity, they all add something valuable. They enrich the picture.
It makes the whole field feel much more alive, actually.
It really does. Which maybe leads to a final thought for you, the listener. As you think about all these shifting ideas within psychoanalysis, how our views on trauma, development, gender, even truth itself have changed. What does that make you think about the nature of human truth more broadly? How do we come to understand ourselves?
That's definitely something to mull over. A great question to end on.
It's the core question in many ways.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the controversies and the richness of psychoanalytic thought. We really hope this gave you a good shortcut to the key ideas and maybe spark some aha moments.
We hope so too.
From all of us here at the Deep Dive, thank you for listening.